So now we're going to look at some examples where there isn't a visual pattern in front of you. So this asks you to figure out what the next two terms in the pattern are. And so hopefully by looking at this, you're going to see 4, 6, 8, and you're going to know that the next one would be 10 and the next one would be 12. Okay, so we're going up by 2 every time. Now what we have to do is write that in a table of values. So that's a little bit tricky. So what we have to realize is that the X represents what's called the term number, which just means this is like term number 1, this is term number 2, this is term number 3, this is term number 4, this is term number 5. So it's just the number of the place in the pattern. So if I said what would the 10th number be, that would be what X is, the term number. And then Y is the, I guess we would say, the actual answer, right? Whatever that would be. So term number 1 has an answer of 4. Term number 2 has an answer of 6. Term number 3 has an answer of 8. Term number 4 has an answer of 10. Now we need to come up with an equation that represents that pattern. This can be very tricky to do, especially when you don't have a visual pattern in front of you. So remember some of the things that we talked about with the visual patterns. The first thing that we want to recognize is that this pattern goes up by 2. That's really important. And hopefully by now you realize that that has a special role in the equation. All of the equations followed this kind of format, and what we went up or down by always went into this spot. Okay, that's really important. Whatever you go up or down by goes into that spot. This one is a lot harder to get. So what you want to do is start testing out the points in the table. So for example, what's 2 times 4? 2 times 4 is 8, but your pattern says 10. What's 2 times 3? 2 times 3 is 6, but your pattern says 8. What's 2 times 2? 2 times 2 is 4, but your pattern says 6. So how do we get that last number? Well, if you hopefully you realize, hey, I just need to add 2. Now, complete coincidence that that's also a 2. These are not always going to be the same number, and I probably picked a bad example here. Often this number is different, okay? So that is how you can find the equation. So the easy part, figure out what you're going up or down by. The harder part, use that information to help you figure out, are we adding something? Are we subtracting something? Okay? So let's look at one that doesn't give you the pattern, it just gives you the table. And we need to look at it to find an equation. So remember, our equation will be y equals something x plus something. Now this one is an interesting one because when we look across the table, what you might notice right away is that you're just adding 2. 4 plus 2 is 6, 3 plus 2 is 5. So this one is a little bit of an interesting pattern, but let's use what I just talked about. So what are you going up by every time? You're going up by 1. So let's put that in the spot. And then what's 1 times 1? That's 1, but it says 3. What's 1 times 2? That's 2, but it says 4. What's 1 times 3? That's 3, but it says 5. How are we getting that second number? We're just adding 2 every time. This will be the equation, or some of you might prefer to write that as just x plus 2. Both of those are fine. Okay, this one is also kind of an interesting one. What you might notice, some of you might notice, hey, aren't you just multiplying by 3? And the answer is yes. But again, let's look at what we've already talked about. What are you going up by? You're going up by 3. So remember, in the equation, where do we put what we're going up by? We can put it right there. Now we have to figure out that second number. Okay, so 3 times 4 is 12. Hey, it says 12. 3 times 3 is 9. Hey, it says 9. 3 times 2 is 6. Hey, that's working. So what that means is we're not adding anything. We're adding 0. So what we would write that as is we'd write that as just y equals 3x. We're not adding anything. So there's our equation. Let's look at another one. Same idea. First step, always figure out what you're going up or down by. 3, 3, 3. Okay, so where does that go in your equation? That goes here. Now comes the tricky part. What's 3 times 4? 3 times 4 is 12, but your table says 11. What's 3 times 3? 3 times 3 is 9, but the table says 8. What's 3 times 2? 6. The table says 5. What's 3 times 1? 3, but the table says 2. How did we go from 3 to 2, or 6 to 5, or 9 to 8? Well, we subtracted 1, so actually this should say minus 1. So sometimes we don't add, we subtract. So our equation will be y equals 3x minus 1. Remember, we can use that equation then to help us predict the next numbers in the pattern. Let's look at one last one. So same thing, start by figuring out what are you going up or down by. In this case, you're going down by 2. So remember, the structure of your equation is that. Where does this number go? It goes right there. Now, tricky part, play around with your table. So 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. How are we going from those numbers? Hopefully you realize, hey, I'm adding 9. I'm adding 9. I'm adding 9 every time. And that is your equation.